Hello, everyone. This is MMP in the Public Purpose, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Tonight, and my guest for tonight is Jeff Epstein of Activist MMT, my good friend by this time. We've been going back and forth and talking to each other for, I guess, a few years now, Jeff.
Yeah, our first interview I think was late 2018 or maybe early 2019.
Was it 2018? Okay, so tonight, what we're going to talk about is a paper that was written recently. It's called the Inflation Reduction Act, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it was put out by the Climate and Community Project. Jeff has already discussed it with Ron Placone, actually. That was a very interesting conversation. We hope to have a conversation as interesting as that. Also, Lisa Theobald is supposed to be here tonight. I'm expecting her. She told me earlier today she would be here. So hopefully she will be momentarily arriving. But we will go ahead at this point. Okay, in any case, okay. So Jeff, let us kick it off. And we can kick it off, I think. Should I share the paper or not bother?
Do whatever you feel should be done.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead?
Okay, I don't think we immediately need to share the paper.
Okay, we could say maybe our overviews of thoughts about it, and then get into the details.
Okay, go ahead then.
All right, so there's a development that I saw in the New York Times today, which I shared with you, which apparently is good, but then I saw something later saying that it's not as obviously good as we originally thought, which we'll go into later. So that would have made it much, much improved over what I'm about to say. So now it's apparently only moderately, very moderately, modestly better than what I originally thought. We'll get into that detail later regarding the New York Times thing. But in general, I think this bill is a net negative. I'm confident this is a net negative bill, setting aside the New York Times thing. It does some genuinely very valuable and good stuff, which we will talk about. It also does a lot of good things that are deeply underfunded, that are focused on the wrong people, that are enough to be able to say we did these wonderful things, but those who most need it don't get it, and those who do get it get hardly like a 10th of the funding, a 20th of the funding that is needed to actually make it happen. So basically this bill does some good stuff, which is absolutely overwhelmed by horrible, terrible stuff. So overall, I think that I'm confident that this bill puts us in a substantially worse position than before it passed. It supercharges the fossil fuel industry. Just a brief example is it approves 5 projects that were denied because they were environmental disasters, and this bill pushes them through and also weakens oversight in general for environmental projects. And so I'll leave it there. But for me, this is a net negative. This is not a good thing, despite the genuinely good things, some genuinely good things it does. What are your thoughts?
Okay, my overview thoughts are very, very similar to yours. First, of course, I was very disappointed at the scale of the bill. 369 billion for the climate part of the bill. The way I look at things, and I know that my view might be considered extreme by some, but I have felt for some time, ever since the series on the Green New Deal by Michael Hexter, which appeared at the UMKC blog back in 2013. Now it's almost 10 years, since that appeared. That the likely costs of actually putting out a Green New Deal would be $6 trillion per year. Extending that out over 10 years, we're talking $60 trillion to really get it under control. So I know that there are lots of other estimates. There was a Howie Hawkins estimate about that that he gave in his campaign, and that amounted to 42 trillion over 10 years, or 4.2 trillion. There was Bernie Sanders' estimate in his campaign, in the 2020 campaign. That was 16.2 trillion, or 1.6 trillion per year. Then some of the climate groups, like the Sunrise group, was talking about $10 trillion over 10 years, or $1 trillion a year. And then somewhat earlier in the administration, the Biden people were talking about maybe $6 trillion over 10 years, or $600 billion a year. So when I look at all those examples, and then I see this $369 billion, it's not just that, I'm underwhelmed, but that I know that is just a nod to the climate crisis, and we are already so far into the climate crisis that we need to blast into it, not about it. Okay, at this point. So for me, the bill was kind of indicative of the way the Democratic Party has been approaching things for the longest time. Okay, specifically recognizing problems, large problems, talking about those kinds of problems, actually running on those kinds of problems, then laboring mightily to get by the opposition of the Republican Party and the conservative Dems, and laboring mightily for a very long time, and bringing forth just a mouse. Now, this bill is worse than a mouse. And the reason why it's worse than a mouse is that it brings forth a mouse with cancer. Or to pursue the analogy further, it brings forth a mouse that it then injects with cancer-causing disease.
I think I'll propose a different analogy, and that is a mouse that does amazing stuff coupled with a 800-pound gorilla that does horrible stuff.
Right. Okay. I like that. That was very good. We'll use that analogy. I'm happy with that analogy.
I mean, because of all the bad stuff, all of the fossil fuel stuff, and that stuff is fully funded. There's no questions about that. All the good stuff is not fully funded. It's pitifully funded, but it's enough for them to say that they did it. And
which is what the Democrats always aim for. In other words, they aim for something they can propagandize about.
Let's forgive $10,000 in debt. Then we can say we forgave debt.
Exactly. Let's forgive $10,000 debt, and let's put 4 more months of moratorium on it.
Yeah, keep stringing you along.
And that'll get us through this election.
Yeah, it's awful.
But it's really so stupid, because if you've got 45 million votes to lock down, which you can lock down by eliminating all the debt, then you're damn stupid to leave the 45 million votes hanging in the air, and many of the people who might produce the 45 million votes pretty angry at your lack of generosity.
And that shows just how desperate they are to hang on to their power, that they would sacrifice 45 million people's lives and those votes, 45 million votes, to cling to their power. That shows how desperate they are.
But to me, it doesn't make sense, because if you go out and get those 45 million votes, then you'll hang on to your power.
But you'll be nibbled at the molecular level by 45 million people that are now empowered, at least substantially empowered, and so that's clearly that's what's more important to them, is to sacrifice these votes in order to do that. Whatever their particular reason for doing that, they are clearly showing that they would rather sacrifice 45 million votes and keep 45 million people crushed by debt.
Yes, okay, I understand that, but to me, it makes no political sense. And all you have to do is to look at history to see that. In other words, if you look at the history of Franklin Roosevelt, he always tried to do everything that he could possibly get through the Congress. He threw all kinds of things against the wall to see if they would stick. And what did he get for it? He got reelected in 1936. He got reelected in 1940. He got reelected in 1944. And if he hadn't died, he probably would have gotten reelected in 1948 also.
Because he helped average people.
Because he helped average people.
Which empowers average people.
But also, that was the way, not just to cling to power, but to stay in power very, very comfortably, because you were extremely popular and you were doing things for people. So here's Biden. He can't have more than a few more years to live, at the most. He may not run again in 2000. Okay.
That assumes he's living now, Joe.
Huh?
That assumes he's alive.
Yeah, I know. We can talk about Joe Biden as if he were Calvin Coolidge and say, how can they tell? But the point being here, that if I were him, okay, and I only had a few years left, which probably is what I got. I mean, I can't tell, at this age, but, who can tell at this age? I might have 15 years left. I might have 1 year left. I might have 2 years left. Who knows? Who can tell? But being in that particular position, just grab it. I mean, grab what's there. Do things for yourself. Do things for your family. Do things for the American people. Do things for the world.
I mean, he is. He's doing what's best for him, in his view, and that is exploiting people. I mean, that's what he's doing. He's exploiting people. That's what's best for him. That's what's best for his pocketbook. That's what's best for his donors. That's what's best for him. He is doing what's best for him. I mean, obviously. I mean, I agree with you. Of course, I agree with you. But that's my cynical interpretation of it, and I don't think it's that far off.
Oh, I don't know if it's far off at all. I know that's your interpretation of it, but I can't understand why he doesn't see that it would be best for him.
Because he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He would rather not be president, but be rich for the rest of his life. That's my speculation.
He's already rich. He's got $15 million.
Well, whatever. All right. Anyway, we're generally on the same page, so I'm a little whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, it doesn't have to make sense to me. I mean, he's in the position of making the decisions. I'm not in the position of making decisions.
Right.
Let's get back to the article.
Okay.
Okay? The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Oh, if I may, I want to comment on your overall assessment, and that is,
You certainly may.
okay, doing something about this crisis. Well, doing something about this crisis will kill those in power. It will kill them. And their definition of being killed, of dying, the definition of dying to those already on top is becoming a member of those not on top. The definition of dying to the rich is becoming poor. The definition of dying, I'm saying this over again, more elegantly. Death to the poor is actual death. Death to the rich is to become poor. And so this is, if they do anything about the climate crisis, if they stop pumping fossil fuels, that means that they will lose their power. They will no longer be on top. They will no longer be rich. Doing anything kills them in their definition of death. And doing nothing kills us in our definition of death. It is an irreconcilable, complete, there is no gray area here. They will not stop pumping out fossil fuels for as long and as hard as they can until we stop them. It's just not going to happen.
Okay,
that's kind of that's where I believe the core of this really is. They need their tanks, which are fueled by fossil fuels, in order to protect themselves.
Jeff, I agree that may be their view, but if you're Biden, you're in the presidency, you're going to stay rich for the rest of your life, which is going to be pretty short. So they can't really hurt you, by stopping you from staying rich. So why not do it? If only for the laughs. If only for the fame.
That would be nice.
If only for going down in history. Why not kick over the traces and start doing what's right? What have you got to lose?
Yes, that would be a very nice prize. The other thing I wanted to say was regarding costs, 60 trillion a year
versus I didn't say 60 trillion a year. I said
over 10 years. Yeah. 60
Okay.
trillion over 10 years,
right.
As opposed to 369 billion over 10 years, which is $36 billion, $37 billion every year, which is a pittance. Not, also what is that focused on? Is it focused on the right stuff anyway? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I also, cost is really one of so many factors, as we both obviously know. Financial cost is just one of so many factors, because what wealth does it create? What real world benefits does it create? So focusing just on cost, I think is, I know that obviously, we're on the same page with this. Just spending that money is to do something which has real world benefits, and existing is worth more than infinite money. So that's all. I know you agree. It's I don't question that though.
So Bonnie asks, can money save them when the earth is dying?
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
Of course. Bonnie knows MMT. Awesome.
But so there must be something sick in that. Something really sick.
Of course.
Something really destructive.
Yep. Yeah. So I just wanted to say those two things. So maybe we want to get into the details of the bill.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's get into the details of the bill.
Okay. You want me to pick one to start?
Yeah. What's the first one? Okay, well,
Well,
we've given the overview.
yes. So I mean, our inflation currently is roughly the Ukrainian conflict, which is affecting energy prices, supply chain issues because of pandemic and other things, and corporate price gouging. Those are, yeah, those are, the four real causes of inflation right now. These are global problems. These are problems that must be solved on a international scale. So no matter what law we pass, we can only have limited effect on inflation. And I think that this particular bill does not so much for inflation. But what was I going to say? Yeah. I can come up with a first detail if you want. Yes.
But do you want to talk about the energy aspects of the bill?
Sure. Why don't we go section by section? We can start.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, so the good.
Excuse me. Do we have a link so people can look at this? Is there a link in the chat or the description so people can do this along with us, or at least the name of it, so that people know what we're talking about?
I think I put a link in the description, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, great.
I believe I have.
Okay.
Someone tell me if there's a link, okay, in the description to the paper, please.
It's called the Inflation Reduction Act: The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly by the Climate and Community Project.
Okay, so the energy portion of it.
So I'll say a detail, and that is one genuinely good thing that it does is that it, in the good section of the energy section, it says that the funding for solar and wind will be guaranteed for 10 years, which is very good because it's not just the amount of money, it's the length of time, so that these companies can have confidence that this funding will be around for a decade at least, which means that people would be more willing to invest in building things, as opposed to, if we don't know the funding is coming next year, like this discretionary funding, then we don't know if the funding is going to come next year. So I'm not going to spend money in building a company or plant, equipment and so on. So that's one very good aspect of this, is to increase funding for 10 years for the domestic manufacture of solar and wind, for example.
But that's only, again, part of the $369 billion.
Right. The funding may not be as much as it should be, but that's an undeniably good thing in my view.
Yeah, I think it's an undeniably good thing too, but it's so small. Okay, but keep on going.
And it also eliminates a lot of the red tape. It says a direct pay option, so that makes it much easier to obtain that money, and it also makes it harder for financial companies to financialize and to do things to make it more complex, so people can make money off of money and so on. So that's my first detail.
Okay, so the bill offers a direct pay option for a tax credit.
Yep.
This could be a huge aid in stopping the financialization of the clean energy transition. Since their initial passage, investment and production tax credits have mutated into a major tax shelter for private banks and Wall Streets. That's a problem not for private developers, but particularly for public and nonprofit actors. To realize the value of the incentives and make project costs pencil out, Most developers must go to massive banks like J.P. Morgan or Bank of America, try to sell their tax break in return for funds via complex and costly deals known as tax equity partnerships. The IRA's direct pay option could unleash huge capacity in renewable energy deployment for governments, energy cooperatives, community groups, local business, and nonprofits.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a good feature of the bill. Okay, except again, it's so small in scale. We might be celebrating if that part of the bill was 10 times as large.
Right. Well, I don't know what the particular funding is, but clearly it's, it's whatever. I'm not sure if it doesn't say the specific numbers there, but obviously based on the total, it can't be a ridiculous amount. So maybe it might make sense to touch on like a good, bad, and ugly, a single good, bad, and ugly for each of these sections, and I think that might easily carry us till 10.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. So a bad in the energy section is it just supercharges the fossil fuel industry. So for every, I don't know exactly the details, but it's something like for every wind farm, every acre of wind land for wind farm or solar has to be matched by offering the fossil fuel industry, auctioning off that same amount of land to the fossil fuel industry, up to 600 million acres of land. So great, we're going to have a lot of solar coupled exactly with the same amount of fossil fuel drilling on the land.
Well, actually, with exactly the same amount, okay, of acreage, right?
Acreage, right? It doesn't say how much damage. Obviously, the land for fossil fuel is going to be slightly more damaging than the land for wind farms and solar, whatever. So that's pretty bad. Oh, and then the end of that, well, part of that section also says subsidies for carbon capture, which the industry's trade group, the fossil fuel industry's trade group, lauds the bill for, which shows how bad it is. Carbon capture is, it's a sham. To just
Carbon capture at this point is a totally unproven technology.
And if it goes wrong, all that it has captured all at once goes back out
into the air.
But let's say that we capture it successfully and we put a lot underground, and now that there's not nearly as much pollution, let's do even more. Like you get a helmet in football, so now I'm not going to just play like I did. Now I'm going to play even harder. So we capture a lot of fossil fuel, capture a lot of carbon into the ground, and then so now we do more because there's not as much carbon in the air, and then it releases, and now we have like basically double of what we had, like instantaneously. It's just a disaster waiting to happen.
Yes.
Assuming that it even works.
That it even works, yes.
Right.
It seems clear that it's the wrong way to go.
Yeah, I agree. So why don't you take
I'll do the next one. One of the most damaging sections in the IRA is mentions quid pro quo of offshore oil and gas for offshore wind. The bill mandates offshore oil and gas leases in Alaska and Gulf of Mexico over the next 10 years and prohibits offshore wind lease sales unless there has been one oil and gas lease sale of at least 60 million acres the prior year.
The size of Michigan.
An area roughly the size of the state of Michigan, yes.
Size of Michigan of fossil fuels.
It reinstates an 80 million acre lease sale in the Gulf of Mexico.
Which is larger than the state of Michigan.
Largest in U.S. history, that was deemed illegal by a federal court for failing to account for climate impacts. So now this bill relieves them of the obligation to account for climate impacts because it just reinstates that sale.
Right. And as it goes forward, it says that it also reduces the ability of climate activists to do something about it, and it also reduces the ability of it allows fossil fuel companies to fast track their projects, so they will have less scrutiny over future
Yes,
projects.
a leaked document shows that the reform would fast track projects, likely leading to oil and gas companies pushing projects through permitting, uh, making the permitting process going through that much more quickly. But when we look at this, okay, when we consider this, the larger meaning of that is that this political party, the Democratic Party, always seems to approach legislation with the idea that it's important to pass um, something. Have to pass something. It doesn't matter how bad it is. They used exactly the same philosophy to pass the Affordable Care Act in 2010. They were warned at the time it was a giveaway to the insurance company, it was a giveaway to the pharmaceutical companies. It really wasn't going to do very much to help the healthcare situation. They could have declined to do anything, put the blame on the Republicans, which was very, very easy to do at that time, and then run on the need to pass a real healthcare bill in 2010, and they probably wouldn't have been slaughtered. But they passed a bill that was obviously going to make the situation somewhat worse in certain particulars. And then, of course, they got swept up in November of 2010 by the Republican Party. And that led, by the way, to all the gerrymandering and all the nonsense between 2010 and 2020. That was certainly an instance where you don't pass just any bill. And maybe this is another case of that. If they had shoved a good bill into the face of the Republicans and Manchin and Sinema, in other words, one that would really have done something for the climate, and then ran on that, blaming the failure on the opposition, would they have done better than they're going to do now? I don't know. I'm just raising the question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
I think the philosophy that these legislators should follow, certainly do much more of, is taking the old saying, do no harm, and put that first. When you pass legislation, do no harm. This bill does not follow that philosophy,
agreed.
does harm.
Right.
And that's a big reason why they should not have passed it. They should have voted it down.
I agree. Shall we go to the next section?
Yes.
Okay. So housing. Why don't you start?
Okay. Housing, the good. The bill expands tax incentives for households on electrification and energy efficiency, providing them up to $7,500 in tax incentives. The bill allocates $9 billion for these measures and a further $1 billion for affordable housing specifically, but excluding public housing. Some multifamily building owners may take advantage of these benefits, but they will mostly benefit the homeowners. Uh, well, the efforts to electrify housing are very important. especially since the oil and gas industry fights to keep buildings hooked up to gas infrastructure. And the electrification and energy upgrades will also help to lower energy bills for homeowners when we have rising inflation and the cost of natural gas is at a high. Some of these provisions are only targeted to low and moderate income homeowners. However, given the inevitable complexity of this kind of rebate policy, we should expect the vast majority of benefits to be captured by moderate income homeowners. I'm not really capable of evaluating that claim. It may be true, but I kind of like to see some numbers. I'd like, kind of like to see some modeling on that. While these small sums are poorly targeted to benefit low-income homeowners, it would be possible for effective state policy to redirect the funds, okay, in a more equitable fashion. And they talk about policy like Pennsylvania's new whole home repairs program, creating statewide systems to repair low-income homes and mom and pop types of rental apartments by using state funding and public logistical support to ensure the households in greatest need gain priority access to federal home and retrofit funds. Coordinated state action could make the best of this federal policy? Question mark. What are the chances of getting coordinated state action to make the best of this particular federal policy? My question would be, how would that be done? When you've got state legislatures in most of the country being controlled by Republicans who would want to see this program fail. So I'm not sure about this description of what is good about this policy.
Well, the bad, I think, kind of responds to. It says the total funding is very small, under $70 per U.S. household.
Okay.
Which is, what's the point? The point is, in my cynical point of view, the point is that this is genuinely good, that is pitifully funded, in order to sound like they care without actually having care.
Right, which is mostly what they do. Mostly what they do are messaging bills.
Right. It says this is an utterly insignificant amount. And also it's completely, thank you guys for regarding the audio in the chat. It is completely focused away from those who most need it. It's not allowed for public housing, for example. All right. So I think there's I like it how they word it in the ugly section. They say that a term that I have not heard before, which is a safe temperature crisis. That's interesting. That's just an interesting way, an interesting phrase, safe temperature crisis. And I just saw a tweet that it's possible that you and I and much of the country, that we could be facing highs during the summer of 125 degrees by 2050.
By 2030?
50.
By 2050.
According to this. But every worst case scenario has not been conservative enough. Every worst case scenario is not it happens much quicker than expected. So
right.
That's currently
been the case so far. And there's nothing in this bill to stop that.
Right.
And it also continue to expect that the projections are too conservative in terms of how bad it's going to get.
Because we're not doing anything except because we're digging as fast as we can. We're not stopping digging
as fast as we can. We are fighting wars that are not necessary to fight. and we are doing very little to stop the greenhouse gases from getting into the air.
It also says that the money targeted to housing, affordable housing, is 0.04% of the bill's total funding. I mean, so that also confirms,
There's nothing to
that
say about that except again to say that this is a messaging bill. In this area, the housing area, it really has no substance.
right.
There's
It
only
has
$1 billion targeted to affordable housing.
right. It is very good, but there's so little funding, it doesn't even matter. But they can say we did very good stuff, and hopefully get some votes and fooling people with that. Yeah. So if there's anything else for the housing section, anything
Okay,
else you want to say for the housing section?
then it sort of goes through what we need.
Yeah, honestly, actually, I actually think it might make sense to skip those sections because we still have 1, 2, 3. We have several sections to go. So,
Okay, so
my suggestion.
Okay, let's go to transportation then.
Yeah.
Okay. So transportation. The legislation would provide up to $7,500 for the purchase of new electric or hybrid cars, and $4,000 for the purchase of used electric cars at the point of sale, rather than through a convoluted type of rebate program.
Right. So again, direct, less red tape.
Which is good. It would also $12 billion in new incentives, plus $20 billion in loans for the creation and conversion of manufacturing facilities to produce zero emissions cars. Okay, now when they're doing loans, they're not actually putting up the 20 billion. Okay, what they're usually doing is creating some sort of loan facility where they put up 10%. Okay, and then the Federal Reserve takes the 10% and creates a loan fund that's up to 20 billion, okay, in loans. So they would really probably be spending only 2 billion here in order to create 20 billion, okay, in loans. But that's for the creation and conversion of manufacturing facilities to produce zero emissions cars.
Right. My favorite part of this, well, not favorite, the thing that most impresses me about this, the good in transportation, is that they are giving $3 billion to the United States Postal Service to upgrade their transportation, upgrade their vehicles to electric, because with all the obvious trying to destroy the United States Postal Service in favor of UPS and FedEx and Amazon and so on. I was surprised to see something so, maybe it's not enough, but it is an obviously good thing to provide something so explicitly for the post office.
Of course, to have the 3 billion spent on that, it's going to be necessary to get rid of Mr. DeJoy, because he's probably going to oppose that.
Oh, okay. Is that okay? That's the head of
to actually stop doing that.
So that's the head of the post office. I guess the Postmaster General is called.
Postmaster General DeJoy. Yeah, the guy who's been trying to ruin the post office since he was appointed by Donald Trump.
There you go.
Okay, bad.
Okay.
So the legislation provides no support for public transit in terms of operating support or capital funding for the electrification of transit fleets. Nor does it provide direct funding to the people who walk or bike such as in the form of tax credits at the point of sale or e-bikes for targeted commuting benefits for people who do not drive. And it points out reliance on automobiles requires considerably higher levels of resource consumption in terms of electricity or fuel and road space, as well as battery minerals, and produces more environmental pollutants through tailpipe emissions from gas-powered cars and tire and brake wear, forming particulate pollution that's in comparison to walking, biking, or taking transit. SUVs remain the deadliest form of transportation in the United States.
Oh, well, yeah, and in the ugly, it actually incentivizes buying them.
That is ugly. That is
So
ugly.
it gives a lot of money, $7,500 for the purchase of a new electric vehicle, $4,000 for the purchase of a used electric vehicle. It gives substantial money for people to buy cars. And I think one of our biggest problems is that we depend on fossil fuels to socialize with other people. Our families cannot be seen without a fossil fuel vehicle in order to go see them. In most cases, many cases. My father lives an hour away. My in-laws live an hour in another direction. My family is across the country. Yep. My friend is flying to Las Vegas because we have created a society that depends on mass transportation. The Levy summer session. How many people had to get on a plane? I had to drive 3 hours, which is not a big deal compared to other people. People flew from Europe. People flew from Texas. People flew from all over the world, Australia, to come to this seminar at the Levy summer session because that's what we do. And even public schools, even local public schools, have to pick up kids on buses so they can all go to this centralized place. And when they can't go there during a pandemic, we tried to pretend that we were in a centralized place with Chromebooks and so on. So, this really pushes that distance society, which can't last. It can't last. But it pushes this by only...
It can't last. It's unsustainable.
But this bill it perpetuates that because it only puts substantial money for vehicles, and it does nothing
into cars,
and nothing for public transportation, bicycles, and walking, and so on. Yeah,
right. Because we hate public transportation, and that's we as Americans.
Well, New Jersey hardly has any. I mean, I guess there's buses if I really tried, but my wife and I wouldn't be able to go to. I mean, my wife is 40 minutes away. I'm 30 minutes away. I'm 35 minutes away. It's impossible. We have to drive to get food. I have to drive to get money to put gas in my car to be able to purchase a car and then put gas in my car in order to drive to the grocery store to get food and then drive it home in order to survive. So.
Yes. That is exactly the way it works for Bonnie and I as well.
And last point about this is that, so in an individual point of view, we need gas to be cheap. In order to survive, we need the gas to be cheap. But in a collective point of view, we need gas to be infinite cost. That conflict, I think, is one of the bigger tensions that shows the severity and precariousness of this crisis.
The severity and the precariousness of our very lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's existence, species. So, I think that pretty well covers the transportation, unless there is.
Okay, environmental justice.
Yeah. All right, I'll take this one if I could start this one.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, it gives $45 billion to environmental justice communities. That's what it's called. Specific grant programs for disadvantaged communities and so on. So it gives money to whatever it means by environmental justice communities. $60 billion, $45 billion specifically focused for whatever, the rest is for other stuff. So $45 billion over 10 years. That's about $4.5 billion. And then it says
$5 billion a year.
A year over 10 years. I mean, yeah, 45 for 10. So each year is $4.5 billion. And then in the next section in the bad, it says Shell, Exxon, and Chevron, just those three companies, made $60 billion in profit, not revenue, in profit in a single quarter. And so I figured it out. Over 10, each year, all the total funding for climate justice activists, communities, is $4.5 billion. And these three companies in each year have $240 billion each year. Yep. Just those three companies. And yep. We think, and so you seriously think that is environmental justice. What is even the point? What is justice but to be able to stand up to empower those who don't have power in order to stand up to those who do have power? This shows that they have zero interest, or maybe 0.0003 interest in doing that, which is again making it appear like they care without actually having to care. That they can brag that they've done something for environmental justice when you look at the details, they actually did hardly anything.
Right, but as we are pointing out, it only makes it appear they care if you don't actually read the bill or the various parts of the bill, or even commentaries on the bill, such as this one, which immediately make it clear that they don't care.
Oh, well, yeah, and I would say, I mean, yes, you're right, but I would say, oh, they care very deeply. Just not about what we do.
Yeah, they care very deeply about something else, which is maintaining a hold on their power. And they care very deeply about something they can message about, but they don't care at all about actually solving the problem.
Right. So that's all I have on the environmental justice. Anything else you want to say about that?
I think we've said what has to be said. They're just, it's just a sham.
Yep.
Forestry.
Okay. I don't have too much to say about this particular section, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay. While industrial sectors like transportation and energy are top-line concerns for combating the climate crisis, land management often flies under the radar. But in 2020, forestry, agriculture, and land use contributed 24% of U.S. total emissions. Okay, so let's see. So, yeah, okay, we'll grant that forestry is a very important area. The IRA includes $5 billion in funding for forests over 10 years. It's $500 million a year. And as part of a suite of recently passed or pending federal bills to improve forest management on public and privately owned forests. IRA will spend a total of $700 million, that's $70 million a year, to public land management agencies to improve staff capacity and fill gaps in understaffed agencies, including the National Park Service, the U.S. Forest Service, and the Bureau of Land Management. So, a few more federal jobs. Only $70 million a year worth.
So 70 million, I mean, that's a few thousand jobs. I mean, who knows? That's
yeah, something
doesn't
like
seem,
that. Yeah, it's probably a few thousand jobs is all.
Yeah.
Not really enough to make much of a difference. In terms of direct forest management funding, the bill will invest $1.8 billion in fuel reduction treatments at the wildland urban interface So that's 180 million a year in fuel reduction treatments. Okay, at those interfaces, which I presume are all across the country. Reducing fire risks for communities living in the shadow of overgrown, dangerous forests, which, by the way, that's been, of course, a major problem in California in some areas, okay, of Colorado. Also, where you have really good weather for a few years, the forests are, totally overgrown, and then you have a dry year, and all that tinder, okay, is there,
Mhm.
and the fire risk is just horrific. That recently happened in New Mexico, by the way, exactly those circumstances.
Mhm.
The outcome was a horrific fire.
Mhm.
Okay, bad. Okay, so again, we have the pattern. The good is nowhere near sufficiently good, and the
It
bad.
is genuinely good, but pitifully underfunded. I mean, some of it. It's there's some genuinely good, pitifully underfunded, and badly focused.
Well, when something is pitifully underfunded, and I'm not sure how you can say it's genuinely good. Okay, in other words,
Well,
the funding
for the 3 people that get it, it's really good.
for the 3 people who get it, it's really good. Yeah. While federal funding for fuel reduction treatment on public lands away from the wildland urban interface has been rapidly increasing, especially on Forest Service land, the IRA could have gone much further on this front. So this is the bad. The bill offers only 200 million for restoration treatments in source watersheds or forests that perform important hydrological functions for downstream water supplies in some of the most parched cities in the country. Sort of translating that a little bit, 200 million over 10 years is only 20 million a year. I mean, what can that do, folks? Really, what can that do? So the ugly part, the bill includes 150 million for underserved forest owners to participate in emerging private markets for mitigation of the climate. This is another way of saying the government is going to subsidize forest based voluntary carbon offsets for small landowners.
Right, and this is another version of this is a joke. This is a blatant joke. Like carbon capture, well, they theoretically can capture carbon, and maybe that could be one of many solutions, whatever. But carbon offsets is just an utter joke, and that's just giving someone else money as a fee so you can just do whatever you like. And since they basically have infinite money and those fees are not as big as they should be, that's just a complete joke.
Right, and they say in the article this is money thrown away at a false solution, and it should be redirected to the same underserved forest owners as direct funding to undertake important forest management projects. I talk a little bit about tribal adaptation and point out there's little to nothing in the IRA that will directly promote indigenous forest management or encourage the use of traditional ecological knowledge in forest management practices led by the tribes themselves. Tribes must have opportunities not just to collaborate, but to lead on restoration of the forests. I think so too, because they've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years. There's a to be determined section here, one forestry related provision in the IRA that could go either way is the investment in wood processing infrastructure. IRA includes 100 million for wood innovation designed as a maximum 50% investment match up to a maximum of $5 million per project. Okay, again, I'm really struck here by the extremely low level of the funds. 100 million for this over 10 years. It's only 10 million a year. It is critical to remove this material from overstocked forests, where this material refers to wood products that are advanced or biomass energy using small diameter wood removed from the restoration treatments for the forests. It's critical to remove this material from overstocked forests, but thus far there is no economic incentive to do so. Creating rural industries that can use this material in ways that do not harm the environment or public health is important. Done poorly, it can incentivize damaging logging and have horrible local quality impacts. So you want to go through mining, okay, and manufacturing?
I actually think if we could do one final section, and that would be labor, and I have some stuff that I'd like to say about that. That's okay.
Okay, great. Go right ahead.
Okay. All right. So one really good thing, I mean, just undeniably good thing, and I think I can only guess that it's reasonably well funded. I can't know, but it seems to be pretty well funded. And that is the second paragraph, which it says it permanently extends the Black Lung Disability Trust Fund for coal miners, because currently coal companies are supposed to be giving their permanently disabled former employees funds for this, that if they have black lung, and so companies will jump through hoops and go bankrupt to avoid having to pay that. And now what this bill does is take that out of companies' hands and permanently funds it federally, nationally. So these people who have black lung and are permanently disabled because of working in coal mines are now, they're permanently funded. So that's just probably one of the better things in this entire bill, which really doesn't have much to do with climate change, very, very indirectly.
Right, but it does have to do with Joe Manchin saying how wonderful it was that he got the miners about permanent funding. That will be good forever, and so that's going to help
him staying office. I didn't.
Old Joe perhaps to be reelected.
No, there you go.
Okay, in 20.
All right, so that's a negative part of it that I didn't realize. But even so, that's clearly a good thing.
Yeah, that's clearly a good thing for people, for the miners themselves. If some decent person had done it, it would have been an unambiguous thing. That is probably something that's in here, though, because Joe Manchin insisted on it.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I guess that's the very, very substantial element that he put in there to, I'm a good guy. Ignore all this.
Look what I did for you guys.
I mean, it's genuinely good, but it's just, he also did a lot of other stuff. Oh, he has I was recently, very briefly, on a boat that was 25 feet. It had 2 bedrooms, one on each side, 25 feet long, which is like, whatever, like all the way back there from one end to the other. And I asked how much gas it takes, and it has 300-gallon tank, two tanks, a total 300 gallons, and it takes diesel. And I looked up, the price of diesel. It's about $5 a gallon, which is $1,500 every fill up. And
my God,
$1,500 for every fill up for a 25-foot boat. And it takes you on, it lasts a few days. Just it doesn't. I don't exactly know, but that's 1 tank of gas, which a boat requires for I guess a decent trip. Joe Manchin's yacht is 25 feet wide.
Oh my God!
So it's 60 feet long and 25 feet wide. So it just shows, obviously, his tank of gas has to be much bigger. It takes diesel, which is much more polluting. Volkswagen had the scandal in Germany of lying about diesel, and it is more polluting than regular fuel. And Joe Manchin has this gigantic boat, which, I mean, I can only guess 1,000-gallon tank. I have no idea, but whatever, 1,000-gallon tank of diesel, one fill up. How many? $5,000? I have no idea. $10,000? One fill up, which shows how rich he is and how polluting he is. So it's
how many gallons of gas is in that? 150 gallons of gas?
in the 25 foot, it's 300 gallons.
300 gallons, right?
So 25, and Joe's ship is yacht is 60 by 25 wide. So I can only guess it's 3 times the size. The tank, I have no idea. So I'm guessing 1,000 gallons in his yacht for one fill up.
Right, for one fill up.
So 1,000 times 5 is $5,000 for filling
right.
up one.
Do we know how many miles per gallon his boat gets?
I don't think that even is really a valid measurement given the waves and the air and whatever. I don't know. But a tank of gas is generally, a few days of traveling.
Why can't these boats have...
Jeff is in the chat. Sorry, got excited. Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Sorry. Jeff
it's all right. It's in the chat. Did somebody mention it?
No, I just saw Jeff Gitter make a message. I haven't seen his name pop up on social media in a while. So, I mean, he's a jerk. Don't worry about him.
Okay, so I guess our overall assessment is to end this, Jeff.
To repeat my overall assessment, it's
just to end, right? Because you have to leave now, right?
Yeah, I need to leave in a couple of minutes. So I am pretty confident that I'm confident in my view that this bill is significantly net negative. And it is.
Let me ask you another question. Okay, they passed this bill now. Okay, the election is coming up in November. Then nothing much happens for the rest of the year. Okay, then let's say that in spite of what people are projecting, that the Democrats hold the Senate and they actually hold the House too. And the reason why this could happen, of course, is because, first of all, so many of those Republican candidates are so out of touch with the polling in their areas. And of course, there's the abortion issue, which is now brought to the fore by the Supreme Court. And since the decision, the polls are showing that the Republicans have been losing support.
Wow, that's
since
interesting.
that decision, there's been a constant draining of support. The last poll I saw showed that the Democrats had a generic polling lead on the Republicans of 4 points, which was a turnaround of 6 points from the spring, of this year when they were behind by 2 points. Now, it's generally agreed that the Republicans, due to gerrymandering and other factors, have a 5-point, a 5-point advantage, built-in advantage compared to the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the Democrats, even though they're ahead by 4 points, they're not even to 50-50 yet.
Right.
Okay, until they roughly get to 5 points.
Right.
But still, they're getting close. If they gain by another 3 points, it's probably clear they're going to retain the House. Okay, Republicans won't be able to make that up if there's an 8-point advantage for the Democrats. For example, in 2018, there was a blue wave when the polls were showing that Democrats had a 7 point advantage, okay, in the polls.
Mhm.
So if it goes as high as an 8 point advantage, they're probably going to retain the House. They're also going to probably increase uh, their senators.
You
Okay.
started off by saying there was a question.
Yeah. My question is that there's that outcome. Okay. Now, given that outcome and the fact that they've passed this so-called climate bill now, what are the chances that they'll take up another climate bill during the next 2 years before the general election? Because certainly this climate bill is a piece of crap, and nobody's going to see changes in their lives due to this particular climate bill. It's not going to really impress anyone,
Except for black lung sufferers and their families.
right? That are an increasingly small proportion of our population.
Right. Oh yeah, increasingly small.
Increasingly small, right?
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? I mean, a vote blue no matter who is like. I mean, yeah, vote blue no matter who. In most cases, vote blue no matter who. But it's like, so we'll get 2 steps away from the Republicans. But why can't we get 100 steps away from the
Away
Republicans?
from the Republicans, but the point I'm making here is that there's going to be increasing pressure to do something for the climate that really counts, because the weather is going to continue to get worse. There are going to be more and more disasters over the next 2 years, and the climate pressure is going to be building, and more
So
people are going to notice it.
So what are the chances in having another kind of climate bill before the
Of
general election?
having the climate bill actually taken up again during the next 2 years. Okay, or by passing this so-called climate bill, have they killed the issue for this presidency? That's my question.
I know. I think there will be something serious happening. Whether it's going to be in the next 2 years or not. I don't hope for it, but we're not going to do anything serious until something really severe happens. And I had, like something very severe is going to happen, not too far off in the future, and that's going to trigger some change. But the problem is that most people have been marinated in marinated in propaganda for most of their lives. And so when that happens, will people ask for what's really needed, or will that be just another instance of Naomi Klein's what's it called? Shock doctrine, ramming through even worse policy under people because people are worried and scared, and so they just want something, and so they'll ram through something that's even worse. Who knows what's going to happen? So yeah, I think something disastrous, unprecedented disastrous, is going to happen in the not so far off future. I don't know if it's going to be within 2 years, but I think that's going to be the trigger for some significant change. But who knows if that change is going to be good change or bad change? I think they're going to do something performative, just like they did now for the next election. I mean, we're going to have Trump point two. I mean, I think that the bad stuff, the really bad stuff, is potentially going to be happening at the changing of presidents in the United States. So it really depends on who the next president is. If it's going to be, Trump 2.0, then, I think that's where things could potentially get a lot worse. If it's another corporate Democrat, then, whatever. We're either going to have an express train to hell or a local train to hell. That's what we're currently on. Hopefully something's going to happen that will change that.
Okay. When they passed the Affordable Care Act in 2010, of course, that sort of froze everything with with respect to healthcare reform. I don't know really until the issues started to get hot again in 2018 or 2019.
Mhm.
But there was a decade lost because they passed that terrible bill in 2000, okay, in 10. Now, maybe a decade will not be lost here because the climate crisis is continuing to intensify. And so the intensity puts on, its own pressure. But to some extent, that also happened, okay, with healthcare, and they still were not motivated. They're still not motivated to take up the Medicare for All bill in any serious way. They introduce it, then they pigeonhole it, and nothing happens. So anyway, I suppose I answered my own question, which is uh, I doubt they're going to do anything further about the climate for this presidency.
No, something disastrous is going to happen, and then something big will happen. But we just have to hope and fight for that to be a good thing and not a bad thing. You know,
So Jeff Ginter's here, and he points out we don't have a decade to waste.
and he also says, we have to demand, and we're
And he is
we
right.
are. Oh, yes, we are being exploited. We have been exploited for centuries. More than a century, centuries at this point. It will not. It will not stop. Just like they will not stop pumping out fossil fuels as fast and as hard and as long as they can. It will not stop until we make it stop. We make
them stop. Right.
Not we. We make them stop. Until we make them stop, they will not stop.
Right.
The only way for real change is to become ungovernable.
Okay, let's outline the steps for becoming ungovernable.
Actually, I need to
You need to go.
close out. Yeah, I'm sorry. I need to go. I need to cover my 13-year-old.
Okay, Jeff. Thank you for coming.
No, I don't mean to rush off. I just like in a minute or so, I need to go. But so
Okay,
yeah.
but it'll probably take a minute to say goodbye. So
Okay. No, it was good. I mean, I feel pretty clear on the bill. Some people are like excited about it just because something happened, but and they're angry because you're complaining. Is this the time to complain? And people are saying. Someone said Medicare for all. Someone's going to die because they can't afford insulin, and then someone says, "You're really choosing today to do this? Is this really the day that you choose to do this?" It's like that is the postponement. That is the micro postponement that we have gotten into. That's why these people die. It's because not today. I care about you, just not today. Just not today.
That's why we have to stop the micro postponements. And we have to get very ungovernable. I certainly agree. And I certainly think when election time comes around, we got to get very ungovernable too. Specifically, we have to vote against anyone who is taking toxic money or who is receiving support from the toxic money people. Hello.
He can't hear you. He says hello. This is the little monster that I have to cover. Little monster.
Okay, what's his name?
His name is his name is Andrew. This is Andrew.
Hi, Andy.
Andrew. Oh yeah. He likes to be called Drew in school. We call him Andrew though.
Oh, Drew. Okay.
Well, he's Andrew to me.
Hi, Drew.
Okay, he wants me to say, I don't know who Drew is, but I know who Andrew is. Okay, on that note.
Okay, Andrew, that was good.
All right, Joe, it was really nice talking with you as usual. That was great. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, thanks, Jeff, and thanks for the music before the
show.
Cool.
Yeah, it was nice. Yep, Bonnie, I'll see you later. Thank you.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, good night.
Except for Jeff.
Yeah. Okay, folks, I'm still here. I'll be here for a few more minutes anyway. I thought that was pretty good, pretty friendly, uh, pretty insightful in some respects. There's K. Steve Wolfbrand. Uh, okay, let me go back to the beginning and get to some of the comments. Sandy says hello to everybody. Hi, Sandy. Sandy, this is Kay here tonight. Lana says, I saw Kay earlier on the news with Jimmy. Well, that was a good many hours ago, wasn't it? Okay, thank you, Stephen. Lana. Kay was watching Rocco earlier. Yeah, it's hard to sit through. Is it 6 hours of MM Tuesdays? Steve says, should have called it a fistful of dollars. Good idea, Steve. Brandy says, hi, Sandy. Sorry I had stepped away to get animal treats and get them corralled for bed. Yep, I know you got quite a few animals, Brandy. Steve says, this sounds terrible what the bill says about fracking. Okay, it is terrible. Okay, it is generally terrible. Activist says, how's my audio compared to Joe's? I don't know, but it was pretty good, Jeff, altogether. I don't know how good it was compared to mine. Yeah, I know. I guess Lisa's not coming. Let's see if she sent me a tweet to explain. Nope, not yet. I'll probably find out what happened tomorrow. But tomorrow, it'll be really important for her to come because the whole show is organized around one of her favorite issues. Specifically what would happen if we turned control of healthcare completely over to the doctors and did not allow anybody to make any decisions about it, okay, except for the doctors. That would, of course, entail getting private equity out of it completely and also making other changes so only doctors would have a say. Steve says, I'm kind of bummed out about the Caleb Maupin scandal. That was ugly. Um, has there been a Caleb Maupin scandal? I hadn't heard about that, Steve. And Brandy said, Steve, let's see what Steve asks. Sandy Dag says, how come they have not done that yet? I'm not sure what you're referring to there, Sandy. Brandy says, Steve, it's just another one down out of 3 in like 8 months. This just confirms to me why we shouldn't idolize anyone. We can respect the work, though. I think that's a good maxim, Brandy, to follow. Respect the work, but do not start to idolize anybody. Lana says, what scandal? Sandy says, I sent my sister a birthday card in the mail. She only lives about 30 minutes from me. It took a week for my card to arrive at her home. Wow. That's the joy. That is Louis DeJoy again. Steve Wolfbrand says, Brandy, yes, agriculture could become impossible in many areas, soon leading to mass starvation, among many other problems. Sandy says there's no real public transportation there. Sandy says you have to have a car in South Jersey. Yeah, we had a meeting of the core group at 10 o'clock on Sunday this weekend. And the reason why it had to be so late was because Shane had been up in New York and he had to take a bus back to South Jersey. He lives close to Atlantic City. Uh, okay, so since so few buses run that way, he wasn't able to get home by 5 or even by 6 or even by 8. So he had to schedule the thing by 10 o'clock last night. But we got it done. We got some good work done on it. So Steve says, here in Los Angeles, our little public transport is filled with homeless and psychotic violent people. So regular commuters are afraid to use it. It's a shame. Steve says, Sandy, we have the same problem in my job. It can take 2 weeks for mail to arrive from the next county over. Well, that's the joy. I mean, it wasn't like that 4 years ago, was it? We have a speed line that we can drive to get a train into Camden, Philadelphia. They are no longer safe for women to ride it alone. Oh my God, that's really awful. Steve says, we have homes here that sell for 70 million, laugh out loud. Sandy, we have had so many heat waves here, the leaves on the trees are already wilted and starting to fall. It's not even September. Oh my God. Okay, what's going on with the election results? Give me a preview.
Maybe Esther knows.
And Jeff Ginter says machines' breath pollutes more than any diesel engine. Oh, Mansion's breath, you mean? Jeff says, I love you guys. Scotty Johnson says, hello, y'all. Jeff Ginter says, yes, I am. Sandy says, hi, Scotty. And Laura says, hey. She says, great to see you, Jeffrey. And Kay says, we love you too, Jeffrey. Jeff says, Democrats win, Republicans win. We all still lose unless we change our focus and our tactics. Completely agree, Jeff. Thanks, Kay. Kay says, YW. The only blue wave that matters is the one that will drown us all if we don't get huge on climate action. I certainly agree with that, Jeff. Sadie says it probably is crap. Brandy, not voting blue no matter who, neither party is taking action. Steve says they should go for the touchdown and massively fund fusion energy. I'm not convinced about fusion energy. For one thing, if we go to fusion energy, we're still going to have control the political parties by energy interests. And Jeff says climate, not a real climate bill. Yeah, true. And Jeff says do not ask a demand. Yes, absolutely. Demand like you mean it or suffer the consequences. Jeff says we don't have a decade to waste. Brandy says war with Russia and China won't help us climate change. Well, it is speeding it up, Brandy. It's measurable that it's speeding it up. And Jeff says that's because we are not ready to make them take it up again. Well, I've been trying to get people ready to make them take it up again, but not enough people are getting to the dump the incumbent show to start a movement. And Sandy says, don't the politicians realize they can't survive either? I don't think they realize it. I think a lot of them think that they can find a way to survive if they have enough money, that they can protect their families with some kind of survivor compounds that filter the air. And I mean, they got to be feeling that way because if not, then their behavior is just insanity.
They're gonna live in a glass dome.
Sandy Degg says, or their devil spawn. I mean, their children. Sandy says, devil. Yeah, I figured you meant devil. Steve Wolfbrand says, massive starvation will be the result. Jeff Ginter says, no one will have to push you off the cliff if you can be made to jump off the cliff with a smile, okay, and a laugh. That's true, Jeff. And Sandy says, hi, Andrew. Sandy says, bye, Jeff. And Jeff says, good night, Jeff. And Dolores says, bye, Jeff. Steve Wolfbrand says, massive starvation will start this year in Somali. It hasn't rained there in 2 years. Oh, my God. And they can't get grain. Steve says massive starvation will spread from there. Jeff says, I hope Lisa's okay. I really suspect she is. She was feeling very good. I talked to her this morning for quite a while. We also exchange messages later in the day. She was set to come for tonight. So I suspect she's okay, but maybe something happened at home. She's had a lot of excitement, okay, at home lately because she added 2 cats and a new dog, and anyway, there's been a lot of excitement. So it's hard to tell, but we'll probably find out tomorrow. I was surprised that they have not gotten rid of the joy. I've been very surprised about that too. It's Biden. I mean, the choice of Biden to run was just awful. It was awful. Of course, it could have been worse. It could have been Buttigieg. It could have been Harris. I think they both would have been worse. Brainy says it was a sex scandal involving his political organization. Oh, too bad. Steve says, Doc, watch Sabby's show about Caleb. It involves a dominatrix. Very complicated. He's a great historian, but I don't idolize him. Just watch occasionally. CPI has been completely disbanded. I guess that's his organization. Okay, thank you, Steve. Sometimes I watch Sabby, so I'll try to take in this show. I find Sabby very congenial myself. Anyway, I guess that kind of does it for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow with what would happen, okay, if doctors are put in control of the healthcare system. Lisa has thought a lot about that, really very deeply, and she will have a lot to say. So thank you for coming, and I will see you tomorrow.